Just a little bit of a foreword before we get started. I'm going to be diving into some spoiler territory surrounding the Tears of the Kingdom, and if that's not your jam, then please pay attention to the chapters and you'll get a warning when the spoilers are coming so you can skip ahead to the next chapter. Additionally, today is actually my birthday, which means that legally you are required to wish me a happy birthday. I don't make the rules, I only enforce them. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was an incredible title in the Zelda series that felt like a true breath of fresh air. So much of it was altered in order to create an absolutely fantastic game, and Tears of the Kingdom sure was a sequel to that. Jokes aside, Tears of the Kingdom did a fantastic job at expanding on the world and lore that Breath of the Wild added to the table by creating more depth, literally and figuratively, because yeah, you can go underground now, as well as adding new characters and tweaking old ones. However, there's one character that still feels very shrouded in mystery, as it really doesn't seem to fit in with any of the other baddies you see in this game. That, of course, is the Wizzrobes. Wizzrobes have existed for a long time in the Zelda universe, but rarely have they had a consistent design. I mean, heck, they were once Toucan Sam. But the Wizzrobes in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are weird in nature. They skip around all jovial while singing, they're often all alone, and even more ominously, they find themselves around ancient ruins that have long since been destroyed. But what are these things exactly? They get weirder when we look into the book The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild Creating a Champion, where we can find concept art of them without their cloak, looking like a portly razor-toothed man with red eyes, and their cloak really is just there to give them the illusion of height and long fingers, which honestly just leaves more questions than answers. If anything, this concept art just makes me think of Charlie's uncle from Always Sunny.
Jack Kelly, lawyer. Good to see you again.
Are those fake hands?
No?
Like most people who don't know something, well, I googled it, and Google brought me to the Zelda wiki, which states that Wizzrobes are undead wizards that can cast beams of magical energy. So, case closed, right? Video's done. Goodbye, go home. Well, no, not exactly, because I believe this is actually only part of the truth regarding the history surrounding Wizzrobes that we see in these two new games. This description of Wizzrobes is attributed to page 103 of the Zelda Encyclopedia, and because I wanted to know more about it, of course, I cracked open my Zelda Encyclopedia and I went to page 103. And I ask you, on this page, where are the Wizzrobes? Now, a bit of context about this page. This is actually the second page in the encyclopedia covering stall enemies. Zelda games aren't always the most consistent, but they are pretty good at naming enemies. And when it comes to enemies that are undead, typically the word stall is put in front of their name. Not always, but typically it is. It doesn't necessarily mean that Wizzrobes aren't undead, but it could mean that they are a part of the undead category. And actually, if we look inside of this block of text, we can find this interesting little tidbit that mentions essentially that when a wizard returns, they often become Wizzrobes. Returns, I'm assuming, means comes back to life. I find this to be rather interesting because wizards are actually not a term you hear very often in The Legend of Zelda, and not really something that exists, like, almost ever. But the keyword there is almost, because they have only shown up in one game, and it was actually the second Zelda game that was ever created. That's The Adventures of Link, of course. And we can actually find these wizards in the encyclopedia with the description explaining that they were a magician that once served the King of Hyrule, and they were among the Wizzrobes that puts Zelda to sleep. Now, for the moment, let's put a pin in this encyclopedia stuff and return to the game side. This right here is where I'm going to be starting to tear into the Tears of the Kingdom, so if you're worried about any kind of spoilers, then skip this chapter if you don't want to hear them. In Tears of the Kingdom, Ganondorf shows the world of Hyrule as it once was, ruled by monsters without a Hylian in sight. And interestingly, amongst the troops shown in the past, we see a large variety of foes, but not a single Wizzrobe is seen in sight. Adding to this strangeness, Wizzrobes can be occasionally found holding a magic rod weapon, and if we take a photo of said weapon, we can see its description, which reads that they were once wielded by ancient magicians. Now, when it comes to magicians, the only real magician we've heard about up until this point was that wizard from the second game. And this here is what brought me to my theory surrounding these Wizzrobes present in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I believe that, unlike Moblins and Bokoblins, Wizzrobes aren't monsters of old, but rather they're traitors to the crown. Magicians that once served the king, but when things went sour prior to the events of Breath of the Wild, they turned on their king and swore their fealty to a new Dark Lord. Perhaps this granted them life after death, or some form of immortality, along with what would obviously be some dark corruption that gave them immense new powers. This corruption likely left them still resembling a Hylian, but in a much more twisted way, which would explain the teeth and the eyeballs. It would also make sense that these once regal magicians had their minds twisted not only by the dark powers that caused them to just now frolic about, enjoy through areas they once swore to protect, but also due to the fact that they're likely over a century old and their mind has simply deteriorated to the point where all they know is destruction. It's actually quite grim to think about these once powerful protectors turning on their people and destroying their homes. Of course, it's all theorizing, but based on what I've seen in the game, coupled with what I've read and of course shown here in the video, I think that it seems pretty clear that this would account to a reason as to why these enemies weren't present in the past and why they would carry weapons that were once wielded by ancient magicians. These beings aren't seen around other monsters because, quite frankly, they aren't like those other monsters. And as said, if they really are as ancient as one might presume, then it's fair to say that their mind is long since gone, so why would they even want the company of anyone, Hylian or monster? This has been an idea I've had for a little while, and I wanted to do a video on it for quite some time, but I never really had the time to do so. If you enjoyed it and you want to see more Zelda stuff, I do have one other video I made about a year ago, and who knows, maybe I'll make another one in another year. But ultimately, if you enjoyed it, felt it deserved any kind of like, comment, subscribe, whatever, feel free to do that. I'd be very appreciative. And if you feel like you have anything you could add or that I may have missed or gotten wrong that might help me further this along, or maybe not, then please let me know in the comments below. I always love to read that kind of stuff. It was fun to look into this, and I enjoyed learning the obscurity surrounding this one enemy within the game. As always, I just hope you have a good one, though, at the end of the day. So much of it was altered in order to create this absolutely fantastic title.